1, 2, 3, funky.
A case that shocked the nation. This is the case of James Bulger. James Bulger was a 2-year-old boy from Kirkby, Merseyside, Liverpool, England. On February 12th, James Bulger and his mother Denise ended up going to a shopping centre in Bootle, England. At 3:30 p.m, James and his mother Denise entered Tim's butcher shop, which is on the lower floor of the shopping centre. Whilst Denise and James were in the butcher shop, Denise got distracted temporarily and she ended up realising that her son James was gone. 2 10-year-old boys had grabbed James by his hand, led him away from his mum and led him out the shopping centre. This moment was caught on CCTV. John Venables and Robert Thompson had missed school that day. They went around terrorising old ladies and they shoplifted various items from various shops. John and Robert walked James for a quarter mile up to the Leeds and Liverpool Canal. They ended up dropping James on his head and James suffered with head injuries. They ended up walking James for another 2.5 miles across Liverpool. They were seen by 38 people. Out of these 38 people, 2 people questioned John and Robert on their relationship with James, and they responded by either saying that James was their brother or that they had found him lost and they were taking him to a police station. They ended up entering a village called Walton. They crossed the road and they led James up a steep hill towards a railway line. When they got to this railway line, John and Robert began to torture James. John and Robert threw blue paint into James's left eye. They kicked him, they stamped on him, they threw stones at him, they threw bricks at him. They put batteries in his mouth and the police suspect that they put these batteries in his backside as well. Finally, they dropped a 10 kg iron bar on James, and after he passed away, they laid his body on the train tracks to make it look like an accident. James's body was later cut in half by a train. James Bulger suffered with 42 different injuries and it's not clear which one killed him because he had so many. The police ended up releasing photos taken from the CCTV footage of John, Robert and James that day. A lady saw these photos on her TV and she recognised John and Robert. This woman ended up calling the police. John and Robert were arrested that day. During police interviews, Robert and John went against each other, but John eventually confessed to the murder. Forensic evidence also connected both boys to the crime scene. John and Robert were referred to as Child A and Child B in the courtroom. They were charged with attempted abduction, abduction and murder, and they denied these charges. Robert Thompson ended up suffering with PTSD after he abducted James with John. John and Robert were both found guilty of their crimes and they were sent to a juvenile detention centre. Apparently, when John Venables was in this juvenile detention centre, he was bragging about his crimes. This man right here, who was also in the centre, attacked John for this. When John and Robert turned 18 years old, they were released with new identities. However, in 2018, John Venables was arrested again for owning indecent images of kids. He was sentenced to 40 months in prison. James Bulger's father wants the original identities of Robert Thompson and John Venables to be revealed to the public.
Hi, I'm Kim. This is the Woodburn family murders. Mark Gago used knives, an axe, a sword, and guns to murder 4 family members in a gruesome rampage. On January 19, 2020, police received a call from Pamela Bremer at a rural home in Southern Oregon. On the call, Pamela told the dispatcher, "I have got the baby protected. Nobody's touching the baby." She told the dispatcher that her son had broken somebody's neck and that she needed somebody now. 5 minutes later, Mark Gago, her son, threw a knife at her. She was holding the baby. Police didn't enter the house until an hour after the call was made. They finally went in. They found 64-year-old Pamela and 9-month-old Olivia Gago brutally murdered. Mark had also murdered his stepfather, 66-year-old Jerry Bremer. He also killed his girlfriend, 31-year-old Shayna Schweitzer. Police said they found Shayna dead with a bloody shovel at her feet. Pamela and baby Olivia were on the floor nearby with massive head trauma. They walked down a dark hallway to find an overturned wheelchair and the headless body of Jerry Bremer. One officer told detectives that it looked like somebody had a blower with red paint and just coated the walls. There was a glimmer of hope when they heard the voice of an 8-year-old girl. Hi, I'm Kim, and this is the Woodburn Family Murders Part 2. There was a glimmer of hope when they heard the voice of an 8-year-old girl. Except when the officer tried to get her to come out, the girl said she couldn't. The killer was holding her hostage. They entered a bedroom and found Mark holding the girl in a hostage hold. Her body was in front of him and his arm was around her neck. Mark yelled, "They lied to me. They lied to me." He also snarled "no" in what the officer described as a really creepy, evil tone. The girl, who was only in 2nd grade, described to her father the events leading up to her rescue. She was in a room during the attack and heard her mother and baby sister crying. Then the house fell eerily quiet. She heard something dripping down the hallway, along with footsteps. Mark came into her room with an axe and grabbed the little girl's hair. He started to strangle her. The sound caused him to pause and she could take a breath. She was able to get away from Mark and the police immediately shot him. The only other survivor was 40-year-old Tracy Burbank, a roommate of the family. She awoke to Mark swinging an axe at her. Mark hit her in the back and pelvis. She tried to run away, but Mark climbed on her back and bit her.
This is why you never judge a book by its cover. On the evening of August 7th, 1985, police received a call about a mentally ill woman attacking her family with a gun. When police arrived at her residence, they didn't hear any shooting or hear any noises coming from inside the house. Police tried yelling for the shooter to come outside, but when she didn't listen, they went in. Inside was a massacre. All 5 family members have been killed, including 2 young children. One of the deceased was Sheila Bamber, the mentally ill woman the police had been called about, and she was holding a rifle that was tucked up against her neck with a gunshot wound underneath her chin. This case gained massive media attention, putting pressure on the police to solve it as quickly as possible, and so they jumped to the conclusion that this had to be a murder-suicide perpetrated by Sheila. But one detective felt like they were missing something and kept investigating. And sure enough, he found something hidden under the stairs at the crime scene that meant Sheila could not be the shooter. To find out what's under the stairs and who the shooter is, check out The Murders at White House Farm on HBO Max. The link to it is in my bio. It's awesome.
The following true crime story is disturbing, warning for graphic violence and murder. Lester and Deborah Jeter were married with 2 beautiful girls, Kelsey and Kirsten. In May 2009, Lester filed for separation. Deborah didn't take it well and she swallowed a bunch of pills in front of her daughters and she was placed in a mental institution. The day after her attempt, Lester files for divorce and gets a restraining order. In the court documents, Lester says Deborah will be getting out in a few days and he was concerned what she would do to the children. The day after Deborah's release, the judge decides to remove the restraining order and allows an unsupervised visit scheduled for June 5th, 2009. June 5th comes around and Deborah calls 911.
Hill County 911, what's your emergency?
I just killed my children.
Excuse me?
I just killed my children. One of them's still alive. Hurry. On Highway 77, right after you go under 35, going towards Milford. Get an ambulance out here to save the one that didn't die. Come on.
What's your name?
You're back on True Crime TikTok. The following true crime story is disturbing, warning for graphic violence and murder. Deborah Jeter, Part 2. June 5th, Deborah picks up her daughters. Deborah takes the girls to an abandoned house and attacks her oldest, Kirsten, first. Kirsten tells her younger sister, Kelsey, to run. Deborah eventually cuts both of the girls' throats and calls 911, and Kirsten is still alive.
Get an ambulance out here to save the one that didn't die. Come on. Hurry up.
What's your name?
Bitch, call them. Have you already called them?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
She might already die because she's flat out blood. And hold on. What, baby? She's still. What did you say? She said, please send to her.
We've got people in round.
Kirsten, although critically injured, survived, and Deborah was arrested and took a plea deal. She will spend the rest of her life in prison without parole.
True crime in 60 seconds. Let's go. On February 14th, 1993, 5-year-old Sarah West and her little brother Seth were being babysat by their 16-year-old neighbor, Billy Schaefer. While watching a horror movie, Billy decided that he wanted to molest Sarah. So while Sarah was sleeping, he went ahead and molested her. He then stabbed her and mutilated her body. It was later found out that he also shot her in the head and he bit her on her thigh and breast. Billy then put Sarah's body into 2 trash bags and threw the trash bags over an embankment. Billy was arrested and openly confessed to this horrific crime. He pled guilty to aggravated murder and was sentenced to life with possibility of parole. On December 2nd, 2019, Billy did go in front of a judge and his request to go on parole was denied due to the horrific nature of this crime.
18-year-old Kevin Davis got into an argument with his mother, Kimberly Hill, when he had asked for permission to kill himself. When she got upset, he then decided to kill her instead. He tried to strangle her, but he could not overpower her, so instead he beat her in the head with a hammer. Kimberly was still alive, so Kevin reached his hand into her skull and squeezed her brains to finish her off. He then lost his virginity to his mother's corpse. He fled the house after the incident and confessed to a couple who then called the police. Kevin confessed to police and was sentenced to life in prison. When asked why he did it, he replied that his mother was the best and she did nothing to deserve it. Quote, "I don't have standards, I don't have morals, a body is a body, a piece of meat."
Tonight on the Bloody Alphabet 2, we're doing the letter R with Dennis Lynn Rader, who I have done a video on before. I'm throwing a trigger warning on this one because, as I said in my previous video, he is extremely disturbing even as far as serial killers go. Dennis Rader was born on March 9th, 1945, and he's an American serial killer known as the BTK Killer or the BTK Strangler. BTK is an abbreviation he gave himself that stands for bind, torture, and kill. Between 1974 and 1991, Rader killed 10 people in Wichita and Park City, Kansas, and sent taunting letters to police and newspapers describing the details of his crimes. After a decade-long hiatus, Rader resumed sending letters in 2004, leading to his 2005 arrest and subsequent guilty plea. From a very young age, Rader harbored sadistic sexual fantasies about torturing trapped and helpless women and also exhibited zoosadism by torturing, killing, and hanging small animals. He also acted out many sexual fetishes. He did some extremely horrible things. One of the worst was hosting shows at his house in which he would allow his dogs to rape the women that he had captive. Dennis is still alive, serving life imprisonment at the El Dorado Correctional Facility.